how does a prince born into a life of just unimaginable luxury end up giving it all away to just sit under a tree? We're going to dive into the epic human story of Siddhartha Gautama's search for answers, and we're pulling it all directly from the most ancient Buddhist texts.
So where are we getting this story from? Well, our guide is the Pali Canon. You're looking at a collection of some of the oldest historical documents from India. We're going straight to the source here, folks, and we're going to use it to understand the incredible account of the man who would become known as the Buddha, starting with the absolutely unbelievable life he chose to leave behind. I mean, listen to that. Those were his own words, recorded thousands of years ago. He's describing a life of almost absurd luxury, a life that's in such stark, dramatic contrast to the path he would eventually choose. It's almost hard to believe.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. We're in the palace, where a young prince named Siddhartha Gautama is living a life literally shielded from any kind of hardship. It was a life designed specifically to prevent any troubling questions from ever even popping into his head. And the details of this life, they're just wild. We are not just talking about being rich. The texts say he had 3 separate palaces, one for the hot season, one for the cold, one for the rainy season. He wore the finest cloth and had a sunshade held over him day and night so he wouldn't be troubled by heat or cold. It was an existence so perfectly curated that every single possible inconvenience was just erased from his sight.
But you can't keep reality out forever, right? That perfect, protected bubble was totally shattered. The texts say that when he finally saw, for the first time, the unavoidable realities of life, an old person, a sick person, a dead person, it just broke the spell. He said the vanity of youth, health, and life completely vanished. Everything he'd known was an illusion, and he had just peeked behind the curtain.
So, as you can imagine, these realizations sparked a massive personal crisis. And it led him to make one of the most radical, dramatic decisions in all of human history. Suddenly, he saw his luxurious life not as a paradise, but as a prison, a crowded and dusty cage. So, at the peak of his youth, he renounced it all. His family, his fortune, his entire future as a king. He just walked away from it to become a homeless wanderer, searching for a real, lasting answer to suffering. And take a look at this map. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture. He physically left his home in the Sakyan kingdom, way up in the foothills of the Himalayas, and journeyed south all the way to Rajagaha. This just shows his incredible commitment. He was literally walking out of one world and deep into the heart of ancient India's spiritual landscape. And let me tell you, this quest was brutal. It led him to study with the most famous teachers of his day, and then to undertake the most extreme forms of self-discipline you can possibly imagine. So first, he went to the best meditation masters around, and he mastered everything they had to teach, reaching these incredibly profound mental states. But he realized that even these blissful states were temporary. They were nice, but they didn't solve the fundamental problem. They weren't the final answer he was looking for. So, having completely exhausted the path of the mind as taught by others, he swung to the complete opposite extreme, the path of punishing the body. He fell in with a group of ascetics, and for 6 long years, he engaged in this severe self-torture, pushing his body to the absolute brink of death. Wow. The description of this period from the texts is just, it's incredibly graphic. They do not pull any punches. It uses these visceral, raw images to show you the absolute, terrifying limit he pushed himself to. He was basically testing the very edge of human endurance. So after 6 years of this, emaciated and literally near death, he had a profound realization. The answer wasn't in the palace of luxury, and it sure wasn't in the pit of self-torture. It had to be somewhere else. He made a decision. He abandoned the path of self-torture and accepted a simple meal to nourish his body. And his 5 ascetic companions, they were horrified. They saw it as a total failure, like he was giving up and going back to luxury. So they left him. In that moment of clarity, he was utterly and completely alone, having rejected the life of a prince and the life of an extreme ascetic. So there he was, sitting alone under what would later become known as the Bodhi tree. He entered a deep meditation, and over the course of a single, extraordinary night, his great awakening just unfolded. In 3 stages, or watches, he saw it all. First, his own past lives, then the karmic cycles of all beings, and finally, he saw the deep cause of suffering and, most importantly, the way to end it.
These words are said to be the first thing he uttered after becoming enlightened. So what's this house builder he's talking about? It's craving, the force that builds the prison of our suffering, life after life. He's saying, I see you, I know how you work, and you can't build this prison for me ever again. He had dismantled it forever.
So, he did it. He found the ultimate answer, the end to all suffering. You'd think it's time for a victory lap, right? Well, the story takes a fascinating turn. The final stage of his journey involved a serious crisis of confidence. He was now faced with this critical dilemma. Okay, great. He'd found something completely world-changing. But was it even possible to explain it to anyone else?
I mean, think about it. He looked out at the world and saw a generation that relishes attachment, a world obsessed with the very things he had just overcome. He felt his discovery was just too subtle, too profound and hard to see. The text actually say his mind leaned towards doing nothing, just inaction. He thought trying to teach this would just be exhausting for him and confusing for everyone else.
And then, according to the story, something incredible happens. A divine being appears before him and literally pleads with him. He begs the Buddha to teach, arguing that, yeah, many are lost, but there are some beings out there with little dust on their eyes who would be able to understand. It took this cosmic plea to convince him to share what he'd found. And with that, his mind was made up. He got up and set out. But this time, he wasn't a prince chasing pleasure or an ascetic seeking liberation through pain. Now, he was a teacher. He walked all the way to the deer park in Benares to find those same 5 friends who had abandoned him. And there, he began a 45-year mission that would literally change the world. So, when you look at this entire incredible journey, from a gilded palace to the edge of death, and finally to a simple seat under a tree, it leaves us with this one profound question. What does it mean to give up everything you have, only to find something that you can give to everyone?